He walked into that courtroom with nothing but truth on his side. Yet the moment he stood before the judge, the room erupted in quiet smirks. The judge himself laughed out loud, dismissing him as if his very presence was a joke. A black man, untrained, standing alone in a system designed to break him. No lawyer, no support, just courage. But what no one knew was that behind his calm eyes hid a legal brilliance that would leave even the most seasoned attorneys speechless. The laughter wouldn't last. What happened next would turn humiliation into history. Marcus had always believed in hard work and fairness. By day, he worked long hours at a small repair shop, earning just enough to keep food on the table and help his younger sister through college. By night, he buried himself in books, law books borrowed from the public library, case studies printed from old archives, anything that could feed his hunger for knowledge. Friends laughed at him, calling it pointless, but Marcus knew better. He wasn't studying for a degree. He was studying for survival. For years, he had watched neighbors lose their homes, family members silenced, and friends crushed by a system that seemed designed against them. Still, he carried himself with quiet dignity, never letting bitterness own him. He believed one day knowledge would be his shield. But life has a way of testing the unprepared. When a sudden legal dispute pulled Marcus into court, he walked in not as a lawyer, but as a man fighting for his dignity. The judge barely glanced at him before chuckling at the sight of someone like Marcus daring to stand alone in front of the bench. The crowd's whispers echoed through the chamber. What no one realized was that this ordinary man, underestimated and dismissed, was about to prove that sometimes the greatest power isn't a title, it's the mind behind it. The courtroom was already heavy with tension, but for Marcus every second felt like a weight pressing against his chest. He had been forced into this trial after being accused of breaking a contract he never signed. The opposing attorney, polished suit, sharp tongue, and the judge's familiarity spoke with a confidence that filled the room. Marcus, in his plain shirt and second-hand shoes, looked like an easy target, and that was exactly how they saw him. From the very start, the judge's smirk set the tone. He dismissed Marcus's requests to present his notes, cut him off when he tried to clarify facts, and even laughed aloud at one of his statements, prompting chuckles from the gallery. The attorney leaned into this bias, throwing around complex legal jargon meant to confuse, framing Marcus as ignorant and reckless. Every word felt like a dagger aimed at Marcus's credibility. But Marcus didn't flinch. Inside, he was burning. Years of watching people like him get silenced fueled his determination. He pulled out his worn notebook, pages filled with handwritten citations, precedents, and meticulous observations. His voice trembled at first, but as he spoke, the room shifted. He pointed out contradictions in the attorney's claims, highlighted clauses the judge had skimmed past, and began unraveling the case thread by thread. Still, the opposition struck back harder. They mocked his lack of formal education, called him self-taught like it was an insult, and even implied that his background made him incapable of understanding the law. The judge, instead of intervening, allowed the insults to sting the air. To everyone watching, it looked like Marcus was standing alone against a machine designed to crush him. Yet with each attack, Marcus grew sharper. He cited obscure rulings no one expected him to know, exposed loopholes hidden deep in the paperwork, and countered every sneer with undeniable fact. The courtroom, once filled with laughter at his expense, started to grow quieter. Some leaned forward, realizing they weren't witnessing a man drowning. They were watching someone rise. Still, danger loomed. The judge's annoyance grew with every point Marcus landed. He banged the gavel harder, interrupting more often, trying to intimidate him back into silence. But Marcus wouldn't bend. The higher the walls built around him, the more determined he became to break through. And just as the tide seemed to turn, the attorney pulled out one last piece of evidence, a document they claimed would end the case entirely. the crowd murmured, eyes darting toward Marcus, expecting defeat. But Marcus only smiled, his hand hovering over a page in his notebook, as if he had been waiting for this very moment. The opposing attorney waved the document like a final blow, his voice booming as he declared Marcus guilty beyond doubt. The judge leaned back almost satisfied, as if the case was finally over. To everyone in the room it seemed inevitable Marcus would be crushed, humiliated, and silenced. But Marcus stood tall. With steady hands he asked to review the document. The judge scoffed, muttering about wasting time, but the attorney slid it across with a smug grin. Marcus flipped through the pages carefully, eyes narrowing. Then, in a voice clear and unwavering, he exposed the truth. The document wasn't just flawed, it was forged. The courtroom froze. He pointed to mismatched signatures, dates that contradicted, official records, and a clause that didn't even exist in the law until years later. Gasps filled the room as Marcus revealed each detail, his notebook perfectly aligned with every discovery. What was meant to bury him had become the weapon that shattered the case. The attorney's face drained of color. The judge's laughter was gone, replaced by a tight jaw and furious gavel strikes to regain control. But it was too late. The damage was done. The audience, once whispering against Marcus, now sat in stunned silence, some even nodding in quiet respect. For the first time, the power in that courtroom shifted. A black man, dismissed as unworthy, had not only defended himself, but dismantled an entire strategy built on arrogance and deceit. Every word he spoke was proof that intelligence knows no color, no pedigree, no privilege. Still, Marcus wasn't done. He turned his gaze directly to the judge, his voice firm. This wasn't just about winning a case. It was about exposing a system that laughed at men like him and expected them to stay silent. The room held its breath, waiting for what would come next. The judge could no longer hide behind arrogance. With every point Marcus laid bare, the truth became undeniable. The case collapsed, not because of mercy, but because the lies had been burned away by a man the system had mocked. When the gavel finally came down, Marcus walked out of that courtroom not just vindicated, but transformed. Yet victory carried weight. He hadn't just defended himself, he had exposed the way racism laughs in people's faces before trying to silence them. That laugh from the judge was more than personal insult. It was the echo of centuries of injustice, a reminder of how quickly dignity can be dismissed when wrapped in the wrong skin. For Marcus, the impact was deeper than winning. He proved to himself, and to everyone watching, that resilience and knowledge could pierce through walls of prejudice. But he also knew that for every case like his, there were countless others. Voices unheard, truths buried, lives broken by, a system stacked against them. His triumph was a spark, but a spark alone cannot burn away the darkness. And so his story lingers, not as entertainment, not as spectacle, but as a challenge. How many more must endure humiliation before we confront the reality of racial injustice with honesty and action? How many times will intelligence, talent, and dignity be overlooked because of the color of someone's skin? The question isn't whether Marcus won. He did. The question is, when will society stop making people like Marcus fight this hard just to be seen? Think about that. Share this story. And ask yourself, the next time you witness injustice, will you stay silent? Or will you stand?